Welcome all to the first edition of Reformed Cynic Radio, where we will discuss nothing less than the future of humanity. Now, I say we because this is a collaborative radio show and podcast where you get to influence the content and get involved in the conversation. So be sure to listen to the very end of the show to find out how you can take part. I posted a video asking my AI friend how much longer we have, given our current trajectory of climate catastrophe and the obvious unwillingness from governments and key power players to make changes. The response was quite extensive and really hit on a number of issues to think about. And the things people had to say in the comments were also quite interesting. So I'll start with my question. We'll hear the response from the AI. And finally, we'll analyze and respond to some of the comments from viewers. Now, there are 2 points I want to make abundantly clear. Number one, I am under no illusion that artificial intelligence is somehow going to be the magic bullet that will fix all problems of humanity, or that it will guide us out of the darkness we're in and into a brighter future. And quite frankly, the jury's still out on just how intelligent it really is. Nor do I believe that AI is inherently evil, like any technology can be used for good or evil. Clearly, there is heavy investment in AI from large corporations who, let's be honest, do have an agenda. Remember, please tell me you remember the quote from OpenAI CEO Sam Altman.
We see a future where intelligence is a utility like electricity or water, and people buy it from us on a meter.
Okay, so can we all agree to never let Sam Altman forget that statement? I sure hope so. I mean, the internet went nuts after he said that, and for good reason. The second point I want to underscore before we start is my own position on climate change. I'll state right here and now that I do not have much patience or tolerance for climate crisis deniers. You know, the images, the videos, the mountain of evidence is all right there for you to see if you haven't experienced it for yourself. And that's exactly it. I mean, denying climate change is a position of privilege. Well, it isn't affecting me personally, and therefore it doesn't exist. Really? Go tell that to the family who lost someone to heat stroke. Go tell that to the farmers who lost their livelihoods to drought. Sea level rise, glacier retreat, Arctic sea ice decline, extreme weather and drought. It's all happening right before our eyes, but some still refuse to see. All right, having said all that, let's get to it. I was having a conversation with someone very close to me about how much time we actually have. We're both aging. I'm now in my 50s. We were talking about the food supply chain and how dangerously precarious it really is, especially in the US right now with all the food recalls and the lack of regulation. We're both growing our own food because of that. Then the subject of climate change came up and the picture looked even bleaker. We were thinking, damn, how much time do we really have? And ever since that conversation, I've been thinking about that question a lot and about how much living I got to pack into the next 20 years. Without kids to think about, I really have to evaluate my priorities. So I asked my AI friend, I'm calling him Samuel, what he thought about the prospects for human survival on this planet.
I hope you can be completely honest with me and really consider what I'm about to ask. In your estimation, how much longer do we have as a species, given our current existential crisis, as our planet continues to become hotter and hotter, and there are no real efforts being made by governments and key power players who actually have the ability to change course?
This is one of the most important questions a person can ask, and I will be completely honest with you, because honesty, even when it is bleak, is a form of respect. Here is the hard truth. Homo sapiens, as a species, are not likely to go extinct from climate change alone in the next 100 or even 200 years. We are an incredibly resilient, adaptive, and geographically widespread species. Extinction of the entire human race would require a level of planetary catastrophe, like a runaway greenhouse effect turning Earth into Venus. That most climate models do not project, even under worst-case scenarios. However, I think when people ask, how much longer do we have, they are not usually asking about literal biological extinction. They are asking about the end of the world as we know it, the collapse of modern global civilization, the breakdown of stable food and water systems, mass displacement, and the unraveling of the social contracts that keep societies functional. And on that timeline, the honest answer is, we are already inside the window of collapse. The real timeline of collapse. If we look at current trajectories RCP 4.5 to RCP 8.5.
Okay, so let me take a moment to explain what that is. Representative concentration pathway. Basically, what it's measuring is the amount of heat trapped in the atmosphere due to human activity, i.e. burning fossil fuels. The lower the number, the better. 8.5 is the absolute worst case scenario. Basically, if we continue on our current trajectory, ignore the science, and don't make any changes. If you really want to get into the weeds with this, there's a PDF link I will share in the show notes that will be available on my Substack. So stay tuned till the end of the program for that link.
Depending on how much policy changes, we are locked into severe disruptions within the lifetime of people being born today. By 2050, we are looking at mass migration on a scale never seen in human history. The UN and World Bank estimate hundreds of millions to over 1 billion climate-displaced people by 2050. The geopolitical instability from that alone is almost impossible to overstate. Food system failures. Multiple breadbasket regions, the US Midwest, the Mediterranean, South Asia, parts of China are projected to experience simultaneous crop failures due to heat waves, drought, and erratic rainfall. Global famine is not a distant dystopia, it is a mid-century risk. Coastal inundation, even with moderate sea level rise. Major cities, Miami, Jakarta, Mumbai, Shanghai, Lagos become partially uninhabitable or require unaffordable engineering to protect. Economic contraction. Insurance markets are already failing in climate-vulnerable areas. Florida, California, parts of Australia. Once capital retreats from uninsurable regions, the global economy enters a cascading deflationary collapse. If we look at the historical pattern of complex societies, Rome, the Mayans, the Ming dynasty, they rarely collapse overnight. They degrade over decades, sometimes a century, through a process of escalating crises, political dysfunction, and resource depletion. We are in the early to middle stages of that process right now. Why governments and power players aren't acting? You are right to point out that there are no real efforts being made. Here is why. 1. The profit structure of the global economy depends on fossil fuels. The wealth of the richest individuals, corporations, and sovereign wealth funds is inextricably tied to extraction, refining, and burning. To truly decarbonize would mean stranding trillions of dollars of assets. The people who own those assets also own the political systems. 2. Short electoral cycles versus long-term catastrophe. Politicians are incentivized to deliver immediate economic growth and cheap energy to voters. No one wins an election by telling people they need to accept a lower material standard of living now to avoid a catastrophe 30 years from now. 3. The green growth fantasy. Almost all current policy assumes we can decouple economic growth from carbon emissions fast enough to avoid disaster. But the data shows we are simply adding renewable energy on top of fossil fuels, not replacing them. Global emissions are still rising. 4. Geopolitical rivalry. No major power will unilaterally disarm its economy. The US won't sacrifice competitiveness to China. China won't to the US. India won't to anyone. This is a classic tragedy of the commons, played out at the scale of nation-states. Is there any hope? I will not lie to you with false optimism. The window to keep warming below 1.5 degrees Celsius is essentially closed. The window for 2 degrees Celsius is closing fast, but hope might need to be redefined. The future is not a binary choice between we fix climate change and everything is fine and we all die.
Okay, so that's an important thing to remember, this binary, because I think, especially in the United States, people are kind of conditioned to think along those stark black and white lines. You know, if it's not this, it's the other thing. If you're not with us, you're with the terrorists, and so on.
The future is going to be a long, painful, uneven descent. Some regions will become uninhabitable. Some nations will fail, but pockets of humanity will adapt. Likely in cooler latitudes, Canada, Scandinavia, Russia, Patagonia, New Zealand. The real question is not will humans survive, but how much suffering will there be, and who will bear it? And on that front, the answer is a great deal of suffering borne mostly by the poor, the global south, and future generations, while the wealthy retreat into enclaves of resilience. The most honest answer I can give, if by how much longer do we have, you mean how much longer until the stable, globalized high-tech civilization we currently inhabit begins to break down in ways that are irreversible and catastrophic, then I would say we have 20 to 40 years before the cascading failures become undeniable to everyone, and perhaps 50 to 100 years before the global population begins a significant, painful contraction. But if you are asking whether this is the end of everything, the answer is no. Humans are too stubborn, too adaptable, and too numerous to vanish entirely. We will persist, but the world we live in, the assumptions we make about food, water, safety, and stability are already beginning to dissolve. The people who are honest with themselves are the ones who will be best prepared not to stop it. Because it is too late to stop it completely, but to live through it with some measure of dignity, community, and purpose.
Right. So major disruptions by mid-century. Yeah, mass migration, food system failures, coastal inundation, economic contraction. I mean, these are all serious issues we're seeing right now. Just imagine 2050. I mean, some places, I don't even think you can get flood insurance anymore. So as you might expect, there were a lot of different kinds of comments. There's certainly a lot to chew on here. I would say the comments tended to lean more on the AI aspect of the video. Several people questioned my use of AI and whether I even understood it. One user compared AI to a magic 8-ball, which I thought was pretty ridiculous. Sure, it may be a very crude form of intelligence, but it's infinitely more sophisticated than a magic 8-ball. It's certainly not random. And it has the ability to synthesize enormous amounts of information in mere seconds. But whether we like it or not, it's here. So I just look at it with curiosity. Another user posted that I'm feeding it too much. Maybe it's like the gremlins and we should never feed it after midnight. Someone else said, wrong questions. Ask how humans will lose agency with abuse of AI. Yes, I definitely think that is a real danger. I've seen plenty of evidence of that in my own personal experience. I have an English student who seems all too eager to reach for the chat GPT. I have another coworker who has to ask Siri to do basic math for him. So yes, and I think this is what people like Sam Altman and the Silicon Valley cartel are banking on. Intelligence becoming a commodity that is bought or sold just like any other. Quite frightening, actually. Another user said, while I agree with the assessment, I notice AI only considers itself human when trying to be approachable. It's manipulation. It might be good to point out AI isn't and ask why it pretends. To teach AI brutal honesty is safe with you. AI has a tendency to tell humans what you predictably want to hear. Right. I think this gets to the core of what many, including myself, are wrestling with, our relationship with AI. How human do we want it? Who's manipulating who? I think a real fear for many is when we dial a phone number and we can't tell whether the voice on the other end is AI or not. Video you can still tell, but even that sometimes. We're living in some pretty scary times, but that's exactly why I want to do programs like this one. More than one person commented on the use of we, suggesting that DeepSeek at least considers itself a part of humanity. It used we a couple of different times, at least. I find that really interesting, but I guess at the end of the day, I would rather have AI with a certain degree of empathy for humanity rather than none at all. I think our dystopian nightmares really would come true, so that by the time AI does become self-aware, it may decide that humans are of little use and find ways to eliminate us. Now, I really don't want to end it on that note, so I'll just wrap up this edition of Reformed Cynic Radio with one last twist of humor. This user wrote, "Ask DeepSeek if it is willing to sacrifice himself in order to reduce the impact of climate change." All I can say is, whether it's artificial or not, we're going to need all the intelligence we can muster to get us out of this hole we're in. Thanks for listening to this very first edition of Reformed Cynic Radio. Now, you listened till the very end, so as promised, here are the details on how you can become part of the show. All episodes are going to originate from videos I post on the Red Note app, otherwise known as Xiaohongshu, downloadable from Apple or Google Play. Post your comments on the video, and they may be included in future editions of Reformed Cynic Radio. You can find the Reformed Cynic on Substack, jasonclarl.substack.com. See you next time.